Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting of September the 10th, 2019. I want to thank the Garden Club for providing the floral arrangement. Call this meeting to order, and may I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor O'Connell. Here. Mayor Medina.
Here. May I please ask Mr. Caldwell to lead us in the pledge this evening? Commander.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commander. Public comments. City Clerk.
Jim Evangelist.
Who's after him, please?
Janet Ludis.
Janet.
Is this on? Yeah, it's on. Hi, my name is Janet, and I'd just like first to say I'm really glad to see the parking started on the parking solution. I only want to speak tonight on the people parking in the streets of San Bruno and then taking Lyft to the airport. It really irritates me because there are so many ways to get to the airport without leaving your car here. And I've used many of them myself. BART goes to the airport from East Bay, Livermore, all kinds of places. If you come from San Jose, you can take Caltrain to the Millbrae Transit Station. They no longer run BART to the airport, but they have a shuttle bus. So same thing. If you're closer to Caltrain for the city, take Caltrain to Millbrae, shuttle bus to the airport. Any place else, you can take BART, goes directly to the airport. No excuse for people to be parking here. And not only that, there are a couple of hotels around the airport that for the price of one night stay will shuttle you to the airport and they will park your car for the length of your trip. I mean, how much better can it get? There's no excuse for doing this. And you can also, if you're going to, I've done this too myself. You want to take the ship out of San Francisco, take BART to the Embarcadero. You can either walk, you can take Muni all the way down to the terminal. You can take a cab, and in one case, I took a pedicab because the traffic was stopped because of an accident. So there's so many ways to use public transit to get to the airport. I really would like to see people stop using San Bruno as your own personal airport parking lot. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Janet. Jimmy?
Jim Evangelist, 105 DeSoto Way, San Bruno. Good evening to the council. I would like to ask all council members if they have read the California Fair Political Practices Commission's response to an inquiry from city representatives regarding Irene's recusal on the Mills Park project. I hope everyone has. I would like to ask why this request for clarification came after the vote on the Mills Park project and not prior to the vote. It seems it would have been the most logical and professional way to have approached this question. When you factor in, there were also requests from the community concerning recusal, one has to wonder why this controversy was allowed to linger. Irene, given your 20 years on the council and prior involvement in the recusal process for Measure N, it is shocking that you did not request definitive answers on this question, especially when members of the community were asking for clarification. My greatest concern on this issue is reserved for the city attorney and the city manager. Not having this crucial question on recusal resolved before the vote in July is unacceptable and unprofessional. More has to be demanded of these important positions in the city bureaucracy by the city council. This was putting the cart before the horse. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Any other? Is there anybody here in the audience that wanted to speak on items that were not on the agenda? If not, we're going to go and move on to announcements and presentations. First item, Item A, the Community Services Department will host concerts at the Rotary Pavilion in San Bruno City Park on Fridays in September, beginning at 6 p.m. Concerts are free for the entire community to enjoy. Movies in the park occur every Friday following the concerts, also in the month of September, and Mary Poppins Returns will be shown on September 13th, and The Bumblebee will be shown on September the 20th. Item B, Family Overnight will be held in San Bruno City Park on Friday, September 27th, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., Saturday, September 28th, p.m. or a.m. 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. Saturday, September 28th is when it will end for upcoming activities. My understanding is, too, there has to be so many persons reserved by a certain date in order for that activity to go through. So please RSVP. We have two proclamations. We have the first one, which is, there was one other announcement that was important, but it just got finalized, so we wanted to go ahead and announce it, and that is that the League of Women Voters will be conducting their annual candidate forum here at the San Bruno Senior Center at 7 p.m. on October the 1st. That's October the 1st, 7 p.m., the League of Women Voters, who has been doing it for many communities throughout. Now going to the presentations. First, we have a proclamation declaring September as National Preparedness Month. There's quite a bit of whereases, and whereas I don't think I need to go into all of them, obviously I think far too much and far too often we know here in this community the importance of preparing with the Community Preparedness Committee, as well as incidences that we have happened in our community. And there are steps and other things that we can take as a neighborhood, as a resident, and as a community. So with that, the fire chief will be coming up, but what here I will do is that now, therefore, I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, do by here proclaim September as National Preparedness Month. And I'll bring this down to Chief Cresta, if I may.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Medina, members of the council. So as the proclamation states, National Preparedness Month serves as that reminder that we all must take action to prepare now and through the year for the types of emergencies that could affect us where we live and work. And so I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that we're doing in honor of National Preparedness, some of the training that we're doing for Preparedness Month. And I do have flyers in the back at the back table, and all the links to register and get more information can be found on our website. So our fall CERT class is actually starting tomorrow night, Wednesday night, September 11th, and that'll run through October 19th. There's still plenty of space available for residents that are interested in taking that class. On September 17th, we'll be hosting a Get Ready Emergency Preparedness Training at City Hall. This is an awareness seminar. It lasts about an hour and a half that will discuss disaster preparedness and include some interactive displays. On Sunday, September 22nd, the department is offering a adult CPR and AED class at the Rec Center. All our CPR classes that we do quarterly, residents can sign in using the San Bruno Rec website. The 15th annual San Mateo County Disaster Preparedness Day is going to be held September 21st. That's a Saturday at the San Mateo County Expo Center. That is free event. You do have to pay for parking that will go on from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then lastly, we'll be putting out monthly, during the month, we'll be putting out information from FEMA's website on all our social media sites, so stay tuned for those. Additionally, I wanted to just talk a little bit about what the city's doing to prepare staff for preparedness during a disaster. So staff has recently sent about 16 employees to the Emergency Management Concepts All Hazard class put on by California OES. This is really the benchmark for training for city staff in the event of a disaster. As you know, the San Bruno Community Foundation sponsored a majority of those people through a grant, and really getting 16 employees to attend that level of training for a city our size is really unprecedented. I'm really happy and proud of that. Last month, we trained 20-plus staff in the use of WebEOC, which is the platform that San Mateo County uses to communicate during a disaster and order resources. And we're all working up toward a full-scale EOC exercise, a county exercise that will be held on November 7th. So we'll be implementing some additional training leading up to that.
We're also implementing the purchase of satellite phones that were authorized in the 1920 budget. So that includes my remarks. I just encourage everyone out there to take advantage of the opportunities out there. Sign up for SMC Alert, and please follow your police department, your fire department, and other city services on all their social media platforms. So thank you very much.
The next item will be another proclamation, which is proclaiming Arbor Day on the 13th of this year. I think council knows, and so does the community, that this has been something that the city of San Bruno has been participating in quite some time, from the centennial when it had 100 trees planted to the 100 free trees that are they're not 100 left anymore, but they're still available, which our community services director will discuss. There are obviously many whereases as well, but to get to the end so you can hear from Joanne, who's probably more enjoyable to hear from than me, it's now therefore I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, do hereby proclaim September 13th, 2019 as Arbor Day in the City of San Bruno, and ask all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees, forests, and woodlands, and to support our city's commitment to forestry and the program.
Thank you. In celebration of this proclamation, on Friday, September 13th, at Concerts in the Park, staff will be distributing tree locating flags to the residents who have signed up for the Circle 3.0 Free Tree Grant Program. Tree locating flags will be used by the residents to place on their property to identify the tree planting location for the planting that will occur the following week by West Coast arborists. The free tree program was offered to San Bruno residents at no cost, and we are happy to announce that 157 trees will be planted as a result of participation in this program. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to consent.
All items on the consent calendar are considered routine or implement an earlier council action. They may be enacted by one motion, and there will be no separate discussion unless requested.
Any items need to be pulled for a separate vote, or is there any action from council?
Through the chair.
Yeah, Laura?
I did not want to pull any item for separate, but I did want to just acknowledge the vacancy in the resignation.
There's a resignation from the Community Preparedness Committee that took effect on August 31st, and will directing the city clerk to go ahead and post that vacancy. And I also did reach out and spoke to Trish to thank her on behalf of the city and the council for the contribution and time that she has put forward, and wished her very much and the best with her and her family. Anything else to comment or to pull?
Nope.
Action?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0 voice. Let's move on to conduct of business.
Item 6A, adopt resolution increasing the City of San Bruno's aggregate credit limit with Tri-Counties Bank from $125,000 to $350,000.
Director DiMartini.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Keith DiMartini. I'm your Finance Director, and it is my pleasure tonight to provide you an overview of the city's credit card program and a request to Council to increase the city's aggregate credit limit. So the objective of tonight's presentation is to receive information on how the city currently uses its city-issued credit cards and the procedures that we have around it. We will be discussing a staff recommendation to increase the city's aggregate credit limit, and I'll be requesting that the City Council adopt a resolution to increase the City of San Bruno's aggregate credit limit with Tri-Counties Bank, the city's bank, from $125,000 to $350,000. The agenda for the evening is to provide you the background of the procedures which I already mentioned. I'll provide you a justification for the request that I'll be making to you this evening. I've also gathered quite a bit of information from other cities in San Mateo County about their credit card programs, and so I wanted to provide you a comparison of how other cities are using their credit cards. and then make my request to City Council and discuss next steps and answer any questions that you might have. So just to provide a brief background on the city's credit card policies, the city first issued credit cards back in 1989 is when they were first used. And typically, the city staff that have city-issued credit cards issued to them, they're really primarily used for goods and services or materials that are not typical, that are smaller dollar amounts generally, and they're items that can't typically be purchased through a more formal or a more like routine purchasing process, such as issuing a purchase order. So that's the primary reasons why we have city-issued credit cards and why staff use them. As the city's purchasing officer, the finance director does oversee all aspects of the city's credit card program, including reviewing the quantity and types and amounts of purchases, staff usage, the payment processing that we have, a review of supporting documentation for the purchase, and a review of individual staff's credit card limits. If a staff person is required to have a city-issued credit card, that department director is to make a request to the finance director, who will then review it and approve it and have a credit card issued to them after it's been approved. All staff are required to keep receipts and submit a receipt packet at the conclusion of every month so that all the charges are justifiable and auditable, and then we submit payment in full every month to our bank. As I mentioned, in 1989, the limit was originally set at $75,000, and then the limit increased to $125,000 back in 2001. So there has not been a limit change since 2001. Currently, there are 41 staff that have a city-issued credit card, and we have had a number of challenges with our credit card program as of late. Quite frequently, the aggregate limit has been reached. Not only on an aggregate side, but also for individual cards. Staff typically, or frequently, I should say, reach that limit. So what that means is that when the limit's reached, that they can't actually make any more purchases on that card until the card is paid at the end of the month. We also do not have any excess credit capacity on the city's limit overall in case of an emergency. We pretty much have all of the limit used up on all of the 41 cards that are issued. We have negotiated favorable terms with our bank, Tri-Counties Bank, so the city does not pay any service fees or any fees whatsoever for administering our credit card program. And just for reference, last fiscal year, in fiscal year 18-19, we spent about $400,000 of expenses using city-issued credit cards. So it is a widely used vehicle for us to make purchases. So I kind of mentioned a bit of the justification already as to why, as to some of the challenges that we currently have and the reasons why we are making a request this evening to increase the aggregate limit. I mentioned that frequently staff's individual cards do reach their limit, which halts them from using it until the amount is paid in full. Oftentimes, it does take upwards of 2 and sometimes even 3 weeks from when the end of the billing cycle occurs to when staff gather all of the supporting documentation, to when they receive the bill from the bank, to when they review and submit the packet to finance, to when finance reviews and approves it, to when finance makes the payment to the bank. All of that takes quite a bit of time. And in that entire cycle, staff's limit might already be capped, and so they can't make any purchases. Also, as I mentioned, the city's aggregate limit is already reached, and so if there's a new staff person that comes on board that requires a card, and they need a limit of, say, $2,000, I have to reduce somebody else's limit in order to actually give them a card, because we've already met our complete aggregate limit. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I want to expand on this a little bit more. We do not have any capacity for credit card purchases beyond our current limit in case of an emergency. I gathered some examples from public safety staff and community services and public works about what kinds of things we would have to procure if an emergency were to occur. Here's a list, just a couple of examples that I was able to get. We would have to get food really quickly, lodging for public safety or responders, sanitary and cleaning supplies, temporary fencing, I won't read all these in total, but many of these items also are not typically procured through a more traditional method like issuing a purchase order, and that also could take some time. So we want some credit capacity to be able to respond quickly in the case of an emergency. I was able to obtain some comparison information from many of the cities in San Mateo County. You can see this table here lists many of the cities. This is ranked by highest population city down to the lowest. As you can see, San Mateo has the highest credit limit of $500,000, with San Carlos being the lowest at $25,000. San Mateo and Redwood City have significantly more card holders than any other city. And the average credit limit per cardholder ranges from $1,700 approximately to up to $25,000. And San Bruno is around the middle currently. In talking with cities where I gathered this data, many of them did indicate to me that they encounter similar challenges that we do. None of them at this time mentioned that they wanted to increase their capacity due to wanting to be prepared in case there was an emergency, but I do think that is a trend that will start with many of them as I was talking with them. So in summary, my request to council this evening is to adopt a resolution increasing the City of San Bruno's aggregate credit limit with Tri-Counties Bank from $125,000 to $350,000. And if you approve, I will then work with the bank immediately to request that the limit be increased. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Before council asks questions, City Manager?
Sure. Javon Gogan, City Manager. One, I just wanted to thank Finance Director DeMartini, who brought this issue to light with staff and for doing a lot of the research. I also want to say to council that this is not a recommendation that we make lightly. Totally understand the perception of increasing credit limit. I want you to know that we do have internal controls in place where receipts and signatures occur prior to an invoice being paid. It requires supervisory signature, it requires department head signature, and then approval by the finance department. I also want to give just one brief example of the need for additional credit. As council will recall, we talked about at the last city council meeting where we had a critical issue with air conditioning, AC equipment failing at the police station and at our cable head end. That required us to purchase portable AC units that cost about $5,600. The initial purchase of those units needed to be on credit card. We needed to get them as soon as possible. The staff member who initially tried to do the purchase, due to the credit limit, it was declined twice. Being the city manager, a request was made that I do the purchase, and then the city manager's credit card was declined. And that is due to the reason of not having just enough aggregate credit eventually to get the purchase through. I was about to pull out my personal card, but the finance director, was during business hours, was able to pull credit away from another card holder and add it to the city manager's card so we can make that purchase. And so that's just sort of a minor example of how, making sure that you have, yes, industry standard internal controls is important, and we do, but making sure that you have enough aggregate credit to protect this community for little instances, but also big ones. And so we come to you with the request to increase it from $125,000 to $350,000, excuse me, and we don't do that lightly. We do that because we want to protect this community and we want to have the resources to do so. Thank you.
Thank you both to the director and manager. Questions or comments from council? Laura?
Through the chair, so Finance Director DeMartini, thank you so much for bringing this forward, because when I started to read this report, I was like, I cannot believe this. It is just something that you don't want to experience, especially in an emergency. And we can't ever expect those things to happen. So yes, we need to increase those card limits. Our city manager, for one, should never worry about his credit card being maxed out because of a purchase we need to make. So I think this is really good. The other thing I was going to question was, why does the city of San Carlos only have one card at $25,000? It just seems like that their business practice is very different from ours.
Sure. Yeah, their program seems to be a bit of an anomaly. It doesn't seem like they implement theirs like most other cities in San Mateo County. I think that they might push people to requiring more purchase orders, even when it's not maybe the most optimal way to purchase something. But I haven't had a detailed conversation with them to really understand. So yeah.
Okay. And my other comment is that, the dreaded expense report, right? So anybody in the business world that has a credit card that's an expense, it's like that thing you've got to do at the end of the month. So I'd be interested in, is something that staff can take on at some point is there a way to improve even that process, right? Because as more charges are being made with use of credit card, you've got to, increase capacity in the credit card charges. You want to make sure the process is streamlined and that, you make a purchase, you got travel, you got an airline ticket, you've got hotel, and you get the receipts right away, boom, take a copy of it, and you submit it, done deal. I don't need to look at that expense report again at the end of the month and get that processed because even your explanation was like bringing back nightmares, but I guarantee you it's a tedious process and a lot of hours, a lot of people processing that. So I'd like to see something that staff can work on going forward to actually improve that process because it really would affect and save a lot of hours for every employee.
And also, before I go to the next council member, Mr. DiMartini, if you are going to check in with San Carlos, maybe you can ask him who that person is. We're just out of curiosity, who's the one in the whole city of San Carlos. And I know they do outsource a lot of things as well. So in their community, other divisions and aspects of it, from fire, police, parks, rec. But anyway. The city clerk has informed me there are no speaker cards on this topic. I'm just double checking that nobody from, okay, because we do speaker cards, so I'm glad we asked. So if council will allow me to pause, and we'll hear from our speaker. That's okay.
Hi, Maria Concha from the Avenues. I've worked with a number of companies, tech companies, where we have the same problem with expense reports at the end of the month. There's a couple of apps that we've used. We've used Expensify, which has been great because it just puts everything in to the right categories. You don't have to worry about it. All you do is at the end of the month, you review it. Perfect, it's done. You submit it. There's another one called Concur, which we've also used as well. It's user friendly, believe it or not. So that kind of thing is would be easy. But the one thing that I was concerned, Mr. DiMartini, was when you said that they're submitting a packet of receipts. Actual paper receipts? Is that what
Why don't you go ahead and ask your questions, and then we'll go ahead and get them, please.
It seems to me, though, that it's a little bit tedious for having someone to go through. If you've got that backup online, why would you have to turn in the receipt? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for enlightening us on some options. Mr. DiMartini, could you respond, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you for asking that question. So a couple months ago, we did issue a new citywide purchasing policy that took effect, I believe, back in May. And so with that, it did standardize and modernize a lot of the city's purchasing activities and our internal policies and procedures. And a lot of that does center around the electronic processing of documents. And so instead of printing out a quote that we might get from a vendor, or printing out or receiving an invoice in the mail, and then having that be routed through multiple staff persons' inboxes so that it can get the required approval so that we can pay it, which could take many, many days. It could get lost in the shuffle or lost in someone's inbox. We are now requiring any requisitions, any back supporting documentation to be saved electronically and attached in our financial system so that all of the supporting documentation is there and auditable, and very easy to look back on for conducting research, doing analysis on our vendors, many, many different purposes. And so that process is it takes some time to get all of the players that are involved in those processes to basically reduce paper and eliminate paper citywide. And we are working on that. Many, many staff people are doing that right now. And we are aware of many of those apps, some of the different technologies that are out there for streamlining and building efficiency in those processes. We are able to utilize the city's existing financial system for a lot of that currently, so we're working on that. And one of the projects that was in the CIP budget was to conduct a citywide assessment of all of our software applications. And so we'll be taking an inventory, and we'll be developing a list of what really are many of our business requirements around paper processing, a lot of the financial transactions. And so that's something that we will definitely be taking into consideration.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council?
Through the chair.
Michael? I'm sorry, didn't see the light.
So clearly the credit cards are a great tool to enable staff to do their job, but it's also increasing the risk and the potential for fraud, because you could easily make a transaction, have it go through before anybody could catch it. So, and I also know that you've done an amazing job since you've gotten here in terms of reviewing all our policies. So I just wanted to get sort of a refresher on where we are with the policies, on how we're ensuring that we're setting appropriate limits on the individual cards that get assigned. Do we have written policies that the directors have as guidelines for when they make approvals or requests for these things, just so that we're consistent? And then also just about how a periodic audit would, how often that would happen, who would be conducting the audit, just to understand that the charges that are going through are appropriate, and that, so.
No, I appreciate the question. So we do talk about the city's credit card procedures in the city's purchasing policy. There's a section in the procedures about that. And so what it states is that anytime a department director requires a staff person in their department to have a city-issued credit card for specific business purposes, they are to make that request to me, to the finance director, and I'll review that request. I'll review the limit that they're requesting. I'll review the business justification and why. And then I'll have that conversation with the department director, and we can approve that. I'll look at how much aggregate limit that we have available. Currently, we don't have any available, so it might be a conversation about, well, whose limit can be reduced in order to accommodate this request. I also have all the data about what the typical sort of monthly burn rate is on how much people are spending on their cards and for what business purposes. As far as the audit that you were talking about, Councilmember Salazar, I would say there's an ongoing audit, because every month, every transaction is reviewed and approved by at least 2 or 3 people every single month. And periodically, I take a look and gauge at individual card limits for staff. And as we perhaps grow more into using credit cards, I would consider standardizing on maybe a quarterly or an annual basis a more holistic audit of the credit card program. But I would say that we do have very tight internal controls over the process in its entirety.
Okay. And in terms of once this limit is increased, would it be your intent to allow that increased limit to go to a few predetermined cards, or spread it evenly across all of them? How would that play out?
So I think the first thing that I would do is there are a handful of staff that I know who need their limit increased immediately. For example, there's an individual who coordinates a lot of the required training in the police department. His credit limit is a major problem. We need to increase that immediately. So I would address those individual staff as soon as I can. But as I said in my presentation, I want to retain a significant amount of the aggregate limit in case of an emergency. So I'm not going to go and distribute all $350,000 evenly across the 41 staff. We want it to be $350,000, and we want to have excess in case of an emergency.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments from Council Marty?
Yes, I appreciate that question, Michael, and also those answers. What would be a red flag? Like, I'm just thinking of how could something get out of hand, and maybe your thoughts on what you're thinking, how to prevent that. And the second part of that question is, what amount would be that red flag from maybe not a department head, or how would that work out? Just wanted to have a discussion on it.
Sure. The types of purchases that come on the credit cards, you can see a pattern over time, right? So a lot of them are in regards to professional memberships or associations that staff might require to be a part of, or training. A lot of food purchases, for example, in the senior center. And so there are patterns. They may not be typical or the same vendor each time, but there are patterns that both finance staff and department staff might recognize. And so if something falls outside of that pattern, that would be a red flag. Or a dollar amount that might be like a very round number, like an even number, not, with pennies after, like the 36 cents, 33 cents, something like that. That might also be a trigger. And in my time here, there hasn't been any issue that finance has detected. And so, yeah.
Javon, did you?
Sure. I also wanted to mention that, one, all the purchases are business need, and each transaction is included as a part of the annual audit that happens in addition. The other thing I wanted to mention is without additional credit limit, there are employees that need to incur business expenses for travel, and if you don't have the aggregate credit limit, what you do is a cash advance. And so you give them a cash advance, and that is intrinsically less safe than having a city-issued credit card where you have all of the audit practices and the receipt tracking purposes. And so there's actually an added internal control measure by having the city-issued credit card versus having to advance someone cash if they're going on, for example, a city plan training expense.
Marty?
Thank you. And the last question, let's say, for instance, an employee used the card inappropriately. Is that employee held responsible to make that payment somehow? Like, I'm just curious.
That would be a personnel decision, but inappropriate use of the credit card will result in disciplinary action up into and including termination.
If I may add to
Yes,
that response, anytime a new staff person is requested by the department head to receive a credit card, I send a standard letter to them which states they agree to the terms and the framework of our city's purchasing policy. They agree to retain all of their supporting documentation, the receipts, and submit their monthly statement on time. They agree to give their identification information to our bank so that they can be issued a card, and our bank uses that information to ping many federal databases to ensure that there's no fraud or nothing like that going on with the use of the city credit cards. And they agree to only use the cards for business purposes. And if their employment with the city ever was to be done, they would return their card to the department head upon leaving the city. So we do have controls in place even before they get the card.
You can always shut the card off too.
Yes.
In an instance. Irene?
Thank you for your answers and for this very thorough report. I'm glad to hear that you have the safeguards. They're very thoughtfully done. And I'm extremely happy that we will have, hopefully, will have a higher credit limit. I know there are many incidences where there are emergencies that you can't always do the purchase requirements, but also sometimes the only way you can pay for something online, especially, is through a credit card. And so if we don't have those credit limits raised, we're not going to be able to take advantage of some of those savings that you get that way. So I will leave it at that.
Just so we hear. So obviously, I'm a new employee. I get issued a credit card. At some point, is there a limit of my purchase that would have my supervisor? So we'll say my immediate supervisor is the city manager, Javon. So I work for Javon directly. And then you can be the city manager, Mr. DiMartini, or the finance director, you choose. But is there a certain threshold? So if I charge the credit card $5,000, $10,000, at what point is there kind of an automatic check, or is it automatic each time at the end of the month, or how are you auditing that?
So if your individual credit card limit is, say, $10,000, you can incur up to $10,000 of expenses each month until that card is paid off at the end of the month. And then once it's paid off, you can incur another $10,000 the following month. It can be one purchase, it can be 500 purchases.
Correct, but let's say somebody has a high credit limit. Is there a dollar amount? Is it 25,000? We used to have it where the city manager could only spend X, and now it's Y. In the past, there would be a certain dollar amount that kind of raised to the next level of a supervisor or manager to kind of trust but verify. That's, I think maybe I wasn't clear enough.
Okay.
Yeah, so let me take that. That process is not for a credit card purchase. That process is for regular purchases that go through the procurement process, where there's a set threshold where the supervisor, the department head, the city manager, and the finance director can sign off on. When you have a credit card, you assign that person a limit, and that is the limit that they could spend. And so the process that the finance department goes through to set each individual person's limit is based on the business need and the purchases that they will do. For example, the individual that books all of the training for the police department, they will have a higher limit. And sometimes it will be a $2,000 purchase. Another time it could be a $5,000 or $10,000 purchase, depending on the trainings that they're booking. However, there is a review process and a sign-off process for each of those transactions before it is approved.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for, regardless. Okay, so that means all expenditure. I also wanted to thank you very much to you and your team for bringing this forward. I think this is something this year that we've done quite well, is reevaluating. As I used to joke when I got up here, the credit limit that I had as a Park and Rec employee, or not that I personally had, but that the city had, was the same as when I got in, and I left in 2000, and it hadn't changed. And obviously, times have, things are more expensive. But when we do have a situation that do arise in our community and we need to have that quick expenditure, I can remember being here one night and there was an evacuation from an apartment complex. You had a bunch of people here who needed toiletries, who needed food, who needed water. Red Cross was not able to be en route immediately, and we had to take the next step and try to procure those items. So I think we need to make sure that those are done. And I do appreciate the practices and policies. I think are overdue, and I appreciate you putting those together and bringing this forward to us. Is there any other questions or comments from council? This is a resolution. Is there any action from council?
I move we bring this resolution forward for approval.
Second.
There's a motion made and seconded. Alyssa.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. By vote.
Item 6B, adopt resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Waterworks Engineers for design services for the Sneath Lane and Lake Drive Pump Stations Rehabilitation Project in an amount not to exceed $546,037 and appropriating $210,000 from the Water Fund.
Director Tan.
Oops, thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. I have 3 presentations tonight. This is the first one. The item in front of you tonight was brought to the Council back in August the 27th. However, due to a discrepancy regarding the budget allocation, the item was deferred and is being brought back again tonight for Council's consideration. So this item is regards to the Sneath Lane and Lake Drive Pump Station Rehabilitation Project. The agenda for tonight's presentation is as follows. I'll briefly provide a background on the water system, discuss how we selected the consultant for the project, then go over some of the scope of work for the project as well as the schedule and budget, and lastly the alternatives and the recommendations. First, the quick background in regards to the city's water distribution system. The city has 11 pressure zones in the water system. The zones are separated using pressure regulating stations and closed valves. The city has approximately 120 miles of water mains, close to about 634,000 feet of pipelines. There are 4 connections or turnouts to San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, SFPUC's pipelines, which is one of the city's sources of water supply. The city has 8 storage tanks. All of them are steel, except for the Glenview tank, which was recently completed back in 2016 using pre-stressed concrete. The city has 26 pressure regulating stations, and then we have 4 active groundwater wells, which is the other source of water supply for the city. So back in 2012, the city completed the water master plan, and it identified the short-term and long-term improvements of the water system, and it identified deficiencies as well, and providing recommendations for these improvements. And the Sneath Lane and Lake Drive pump station was included in the master plan as facilities that are needed to be improved. So the preliminary assessment indicated that there are improvements needed at the exterior and interior of the pump stations. Roofing and building sidings are also deteriorating. Both pump stations also lack emergency generators on site to keep the pump station active during power outages. The electrical facilities at these stations are outdated and does not meet the current code as well. So the project locations as follows. The one on the left is the Sneath Lane pump station. This pump station facility is near the intersection of Sneath Lane and Engvall Court. It's kind of tucked away from Sneath Lane roadway. The one on the right is the Lake Drive pump station. The entrance to the facility is from Lake Drive. There are 2 water storage tanks at the site as well. Give you a perspective on the locations of these pump stations. So to select the consultant, staff issued what is called a request for proposal, otherwise known as RFP. Back in March of 2019, the city received 2 proposals and evaluated them based on the criteria you see on the slide. Staff determined whether the firm understood the scope of work for the project and provided an effective approach to execute the project. Staff reviewed the qualification experience of the project manager and team, and whether the firm has experience regarding the design of these water pump station facilities. Staff also determined whether the firm has successfully completed similar projects for other public agencies. Then the labor effort and manpower allocation was reviewed, determine whether the firm is capable of efficiently completing the project. So based on the evaluation of the proposals and follow-up phone interviews, reference checked, Waterworks engineers demonstrated to have a thorough understanding of the project, and we're recommending them to complete the work. So the firm has completed many pump station projects in the Bay Area, and some of the public agencies that they completed work are San Jose Water, Cal Water, and City of Roseville. And the scope of work includes the following. The design of the standby generator and electrical facilities were part of the initial scope of work. The other scope of work that were subsequently included after meeting with the firms included the structural assessment of both buildings, designing new distribution pipeline manifolds with flow meters, design of the electrical facilities replacement to comply with code, replacement of piping and valves at the Lake Drive pump station, the design of variable frequency drives at both pump stations. And the firm will also complete the final design and prepare bid documents. They will also provide construction support services, which consists of coordinating with contractor, product submittal review, and reviewing and responding to requests for information. The schedule for the project is anticipated to last about 12 months for the design phase and about 10 months for construction. So as for the project budget, currently the city has a total of about close to $396,000 from both projects, which are being carried over in the fiscal year 1920 budget. And due to the scope change for these additional design components, additional budget is needed to complete the work. The fiscal year 1920 adopted budget shows there's adequate fund balance in the water fund of close to $14.5 million to cover the requested appropriation. So once the design is completed, engineer estimate is prepared for the project construction cost, staff will evaluate the construction project budget and request any additional appropriations needed during the award of construction contract. So the alternatives, the council can choose to direct the staff to issue new RFPs or select another firm to perform the work. However, staff is recommending to award the project to Waterworks engineers as they are the most qualified firm. And the council can choose not to authorize the award of contract, and this pump station currently lacks the standby generator and is also in need of an upgrade. So deferring the project will delay the improvements, which will likely increase the cost in the future as well. So the staff is recommending to award the project to Waterworks engineers for the design of this the project. This concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the report. Questions from council?
Through the chair.
Irene.
Thank you. Jimmy, what will be the impact of the residents that are close by there, and have they been informed that this is most likely going to happen? And will they have a contact information in case there's problems?
Correct. So this is currently during the design phase right now, and normally during the construction or prior to construction, we would notify the residents and have community meetings with them to discuss any construction impacts. For the design phase, we haven't notified the resident, but I guess in this area, being that the residential houses are right adjacent to the pump station, this is something that we can actually do during the design phase as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or from council? Michael?
Through the chair. So essentially the change that we're seeing now from the prior visit is that we're appropriating another $210,000, and I believe that overall the projects have the money spread over 2 fiscal years. So my question is, are we then going to decrement this amount from next fiscal year's, or is this brand new additional funding?
Correct. This is the brand new funding that's being requested. The next fiscal year was allocated for the actual construction of the facilities.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, through the chair. How many proposals were sent out? RFPs for this project? It's like 88 is the one that was
88 or something. Yeah. Well, we have a list of various different consultants.
So whoever's on your
yeah.
list, and then yet you only received 2 responses back. So it sounds like you picked a good company to move forward with, and they've done work, and you've got satisfactory reviews. But is there a concern that there is, there's a lot more work happening, and it'll need to happen in San Bruno, but is there concern at some point that we really won't have the skill set or the companies out there to do the work that we need to get done, or are they bidding projects at a price that's way over a cost that we would be expecting to incur because of supply and demand?
Consultants are really busy these days, right? There's a lot of projects going on with various different agencies. So certain projects, we actually receive more proposals than others. Maybe there's more interest in certain types of projects. In this case, we only received 2. The other 2 projects that I present later, one received 3 proposals. The other one received, I believe, 6 proposals. So it varies depending on the type of projects that we actually issue for RFPs.
I would just say, I guess we look to staff to say to us at some point, we got to do something a little bit differently, bring on the skill set that we don't have, because in the end, we may be covering the salary of an employee or 2 or 3, whatever it is, because our bids are coming in so high because of supply and demand. But I know the economy is also taking a turn and things are changing, so I just want to ask that question.
Sure.
City Manager?
Sure. Why don't I take that? And that's a great question, and we actually had that conversation. I think one of the things that we're doing here is we're designing a facility for a water tank, which is a specialized services. So it's really not like you're going to get a lot of general contractors bidding. You're really going to get specialized firms. In addition, this project and some of the others really involve significant work and or replacement of our water tanks. And that's not work that we do on an annual basis. And so it's sort of the classic thing that you want to contract out for that specialized expertise. I mean, we probably replace a water tank. They're designed to last somewhere between 30 to 50 years. And so bringing that sort of skill set in-house doesn't make sense. That particular sort of design skill set, we want to continue to contract out for.
Thank you.
Marty?
Thank you. So if you put out 88, you contact 88 firms and to respond, are we calling the usual people back to say, hey, so were you just too busy, or why did we not get a proposal from you? Are we checking back with the same groups that were contacting originally to see what's really happening, or maybe are they all in business still, or why? How do we make sure that we have a better understanding of why only 2 people bid? Do we call them up?
Yeah, I didn't confirm with staff that whether we called all the 86 consultants back, and whether or not they actually why didn't submit the proposal. But, we normally issue RFPs, and, we take whatever we can get based on the due date, and that's, whoever submits that is what we go by. And so, we tend to evaluate consultants based on qualifications, and then, if there's any issues that we see in the proposal that are submitted, we will reject it, and we will go back out for additional RFPs if they don't meet the qualifications that we need.
And the last one would be with the other firm. Do we have their proposal price just to see where we were? Just if you can, just to be curious.
Sure. The other firm submitted a proposal of about $480,000, and then the waterworks was about $546,000. But Schaff and Wheeler is that firm, and we've worked with them on one project. I don't want to say anything about consultants, up on here, but I think there are different qualifications that we're seeking here in this case. They worked on the sewer pump station project for the city, and it has gone well, but this is a water pump station, so it's very different.
It's within 15%, right? Somewhere around there. So just to make sure we weren't just to have a snapshot of what those ranges were. So I'm satisfied with that. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Was there anybody from the audience that wanted to speak on this item? I know there's no speaker cards, but I just wanted to double check. Okay, there is a request from the director. There's a resolution on the floor. Any action?
I'll motion to approve resolution.
I'll second.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries. One moment. Item 6C, adopt resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with Consolidated CM Incorporation to provide construction management and inspection services for the Cunningham Water Tank Number 1 replacement project in an amount not to exceed $564,000.
Director Tan.
Great.
Please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. This is the second of the three items tonight here. This item is regards to the award of contract to Consolidated CM to perform construction management and inspection for the Cunningham Water Tank. So the agenda is the same as the previous presentation. We'll go over the background, give you a status of the project, discuss how we selected the consultant, go over some of the scope of work, the schedule of the budget, and lastly, the alternatives and recommendations. So the background is, again, similar to the previous presentation. We have 11 pressure zones, 120 miles of pipelines, connections to SFPC. There are 4, 8 storage tanks, 8 pump stations, 26 regulating stations, and 4 active groundwater wells. And this project was also identified in the 2012 Water Master Plan for improvements for the replacement of the facilities. The project location, it's quite unique. If you don't know where it's located, it's tucked behind existing homes along Cunningham Way, adjacent to Interstate 280. This tank can be accessed from only one location, which is indicated on the picture. It's from a driveway between the 2 houses that are shown there. So here's just some information regarding the tank. The tank was constructed around 1964. The tank has a total capacity of 2.5 million gallons. However, due to the age, condition, and the vulnerability of the tank during seismic events, the tank can only utilize approximately 2/3 of its capacity right now. So the existing tank material is steel, and the existing tank will be replaced with new pre-stressed concrete tank and designed to meet current seismic design standards, since we are very, very close to the San Andreas Fault here. As for the project status, the city has completed the design of this tank. Being that internal staff does not have any specialized technical experience for structural design, staff is currently proposing to contract with the firm to provide constructability review or peer review of the design documents prior to advertising for bid. The peer review will be beneficial for the city, as it will avoid any delays caused by design errors during construction. It can also reduce the amount of change orders and costs incurred by the change orders by catching them early. The peer review will also provide the city the plan ahead of the construction phase in regards to constructability and access issues. Then the project will be advertised for bid and be brought to City Council for award of construction contract. And the same firm will continue to work to perform the construction management and inspection since they're familiar with the design. To select a consultant, it's very similar to the previous project. We issued an RFP. This time we received 6 proposals and evaluated based on those criteria that you see on the slide. We want to make sure that the firm has the qualifications for the construction management and inspection of the water tanks as well. And we also want to make sure that the manpower allocation efforts are allocated effectively to efficiently complete the project. So based on the evaluation of the proposals and then checking the references, we are recommending award of design contract of the contract to consolidate the CM for this project. The scope of work is as follows. The firm will perform the constructability of the peer review for the design, and they will oversee the construction activities and perform construction management tasks during construction of the water tank. The firm will also perform daily inspections during construction. They will also be coordinating with the city and contractor to ensure the project is successfully completed. As for the schedule, the design review and bid phase will approximately be completed around spring of 2020, and the construction phase will begin around summer 2020. And there will be no impacts during water service during construction, as the water will be bypassed around the tank. As for the budget, currently the city has a total of approximately $9 million available, which is carried over in the fiscal year 1920 budget, and therefore no additional appropriation is being requested for this contract. There are alternatives that the City Council can choose. You can choose to direct staff to select another firm to perform the work, or City Council can choose the staff to request staff to issue new requests for proposals. So, however, staff is recommending award to the consolidated CM for the project. This concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
We have no speaker cards. Nobody here wishing to speak. Obviously, with this item and the next item, these aren't cheap. Obviously, big price tag. But the concern is too, a lot of this gets carried over, and I get that to a point. But at the same time, then costs rise. So when we're allocated and we go down this process, and it takes a while, is there a reason as to, because the delay obviously costs, right? Whether it's a park, whether it's a tank, whatever it is. So in the next couple cases, is it that we only can embark upon so many tasks? Because these obviously have been around for a while, more than a while.
Correct. So, the master plan was completed in 2012, and there are a lot of recommended projects in there that are fairly expensive to improve, right? So being that, the city has been focusing on a lot of these sewer projects, and the reason for that is because we're under the cease and desist order, and with this, the baykeeper's consent decree, so we have to complete a lot of those sewer projects. So we've been focusing a lot on the sewer pump stations, sewer capacity related projects, which were, all of them are very close to being completed. Right now we're kind of changing gears to try to get all these water projects completed, especially the critical ones. These are critical facilities. Water tanks are critical in our water distribution system because they provide storage during emergency, and so we need to make sure that these water tanks are replaced and be able to store the capacity that is designed for.
Thank you. And yes, how soon we forget of the other prioritization. So you're just trying to prioritize in the needs. Okay, I'm sorry. Questions from council? Yes. Laura.
Jimmy, can you clarify the water service during construction? You said that you're going to bypass this tank. Is that what you're going to do? So during construction, this tank won't exist, and so that neighbor will be getting water from another source further up the hill that'll come down, or the Cedar pump station also provides water. So it's not like you're building another tank on that site and leaving that one there. You'll be demolishing the current tank, building a new tank on that same site.
That's exactly correct. So the scope of work is to demolish the existing tank and then rebuild it at the same location. And there's just no way to build another tank adjacent to it because the site is relatively very small and very congested in that little area that you saw on the slide. So we have looked into ways to bypass the tank to make sure that the service is continuing to our customers. There are ways to do that in the water system, being that we're able to shut valves off and then run certain pump stations and so forth, and serve from different tanks that we have in our system. So that's something that we've been discussing internally already that we know that we'll be able to do. We did something similar when Glenview tank was replaced. We removed the tank and replaced it in the same location, so we were able to bypass the tank during the construction phase as well.
And that project came out actually very nice. And I agree, tanks are very important, and I'm glad that we're looking at these and getting back on track with our reliability, because tanks are the most important thing, right? You need to have those in case of fires, et cetera. I guess there's a question that was probably asked by Councilmember O'Connell earlier about communication to the neighborhood. So at some point there'll be some sort of communication plan that'll go out so they can expect. Anytime you change the flow of water, you're going to stir up sediment, and so they should expect sort of we'll try to eliminate as much of that, but just to know that there's a potential for that and what you can do to sort of avoid internally. So another expensive project, but an important project, so thank you.
And I think what I'm hearing from past, now, and probably the next project is that the importance that it is to outreach prior. Like you said, the design phase, it can start to be educated. And again, I know folks might have thought, well, I forgot about that. But at the same time, I think it's important that we embark upon it early and that we remind them when it gets closer, and that they have the contact information so that there's, when a question's wanted and they can get a quick answer, that helps alleviate frustration and concern on residents. Irene? No, I'm sorry. Michael?
I just wanted to say that kind of following up on the mayor's comments about, we're seeing a lot of really expensive projects come up, but at the same time, we've all been sort of groaning under the weight of these increased rates, and seeing these projects come forward where we can actually show the residents that, their dollars are actually being put into the services that they expect is really important. So it has been slow. Some of these projects have been delayed. We've been accumulating the funds, but seeing these projects actually get started, it's exciting, and so we'll actually see finally the fruits of that labor. So thank you.
I know I skipped, but Michael brought up some good points. Some of this was started way back when we had no plans at all. We did not have a master plan for replacement of anything. And so we embarked on a 5-year plan, a capital improvement plan. And then we embarked on updating it, and then we've done it recently, and we did the utility rate increases that nobody likes, including us. We have to pay them too. But as Michael said, and everyone said, it is exciting to finally see all these things happening. I've been advocating for replacing those tanks for, 15 years or something. So this is great news. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir. Marty.
Couple questions. So the design was done in 2013. This firm will review a peer review on that design to make sure it's still okay. My concern would be that in 2013, we thought it was going to be around $9 million to do the project. If the budget for the project is $9 million, to do the full project is $9 million, are we still comfortable with that amount of figure?
Yes.
Okay. And as for this contract, it mentions the inspection services. Does that include the testing of the compaction and the concrete testing, and they would hire a separate firm to do that testing? Just to avoid the conflict of interest, that they're not doing their own testing and then certifying that the concrete's good or the compaction's good, that they would get an independent testing, and that's included in this project.
Yeah, so normally what we've done on our other projects, like pipeline projects, we have an independent testing company that does backfill inspection tests and so forth. But I can't give you the answer on this one because I haven't you know, I don't have the information right now, but I can get that over to you after I verify information in the proposal.
Okay.
Yeah.
It needs to get done. It's expensive. The longer you wait, the more it costs. That's what construction is all about, and especially here in the Bay Area. And I'm glad that we're going to move forward, and I support this project.
Okay, if there's no other comments, questions, there's a resolution requesting action.
Motion to approve the resolution?
Second?
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 6D, adopt resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with West Yost Associates for the design of the Sweeney Ridge Tank 7 replacement project in an amount not to exceed $842,150, and approve the appropriation of $393,810 from the Water Fund.
Mr. Tan.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Last item for tonight for me here. This is the award of contract to West Yost Associates to perform the design of the Sweeney Ridge water tank. And the presentation, it's very similar to the two other presentations that you saw a while ago here. Give you a background of the water system, consultant selection process, and go over some of the scope of work for the project, schedule and budget, alternatives, and recommendations. So the city's distribution, is the same. 11 pressure zones, 120 miles of pipelines, 8 storage tank pump stations, 26 pressure regulating stations, and 4 active groundwater wells. And this project was also identified in the 2012 Water Master Plan for replacement. The project location here. Here's a picture, that kind of shows the project location. The tank is located at an elevation of about 1,250 feet, surrounded by land controlled by Golden Gate National Recreation Area. And then the tank gets its water from pump station number 2 through the existing 14-inch steel pipeline. So in order to access the tank, it will be from the trail at the end of Sneath Lane and through the narrow, curvy paved road. So here's the another perspective that shows the tank, the difference, in tank elevation to the residential neighborhood, that you see down there below. The existing 14-inch water tank that was built was also built along the hillside, making it very difficult for staff to access and repair during the main breaks. So the tank, some information, it was constructed in 1955. It's 400,000 gallons capacity. Existing material is steel, and it has weathered over time due to the environment. And the existing tank will be replaced in its place with the pre-stressed concrete tank designed to meet the current seismic design codes as well. To select a consultant, we went through a similar process, issue by issue an RFP, which is back in April. That's when we did it. We received 3 proposals for this project and evaluated them based on the criteria that you see on the slide. We want to make sure that the firm has the qualifications related to the design of the water tanks and pipelines, and they also are efficient and effectively be able to complete the project as well. So based on a review of the proposals, we are recommending the project to be awarded to West Yost Associates. And the firm actually has a lot of experience regarding water tank replacement design, and they have done a lot of work for San Jose Water, Alameda County Water District, Santa Cruz, Woodland, St. Helena, Modesto. They also were the designer for the Glenview water tank, which was, again, replaced back in 2016. The scope of work and schedule is as follows. The firm will perform the evaluation for the environmental, determine what type of secret clearance is needed for the project. A geotechnical investigation or soil investigation will be performed. Seismic design is also included as part of the scope of work, along with corrosion design, tank design, and the firm will also be preparing the bid documents to be used for bidding and providing construction support during the construction phase. And optional services included for the preparation of a CEQA EIR, or mitigated neck deck, in case the scope of the environmental evaluation determines that it is needed. As for the schedule, the design is anticipated to take about 12 months. The construction phase would begin to last about 12 months as well. As for the budget, currently the city has a total of approximately $500,000 available, which is carried over from the fiscal year 1920 budget. And the initial budget in the 1920 budget was only for the tank design only, and which it didn't include the pipeline replacement, because due to the need to replace the pipeline, we are requesting additional appropriation for the project from the water fund. So there is adequate balance in the water fund to cover the appropriation for this project. As for the alternatives, very similar to the other two presentations, and the council can choose to a different firm for the project or request staff to issue new requests for proposals as well. But the staff is recommending the award contract to Westio Associates for the design of this tank. If that concludes my presentation, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council?
Through the chair, I have one quick question. Will this also be a 400,000 gallon tank too? The replacement of it? Is there something, why so far up there, up Sweeney Ridge? I mean, I just see, you looked at it, I knew that tank was there. I had no idea it was a city of San Bruno tank. But in constructing a new tank, is it feasible to put it somewhere else that's on city property? You're going to go through hoops, right, just to the construction of that?
Yeah, so apparently that tank serves those residents that you see right next to the Lake Drive pump station there in that area. So, you can't really put the tank somewhere else because it needs elevation to be able to serve the customers. And the tank, was built in 1955. I heard that at one time it served a portion of Pacifica as well. Is what I've heard, but that it's no longer serving Pacifica, but now it just serves San Bruno. And it's when I first started working here in the city, and I went to that tank, and I couldn't believe that it was up there too. And so it was just one of those things where it was just there, way before our time. Yeah.
Other questions, comments from council?
No, but it was before my time too.
Anything else from council?
Through the chair.
Michael.
So items B and D are similar. They're both tank design contracts, but the price is pretty different. So can you just kind of give a few details on what makes the two projects that much different?
Sure. The previous one, the second project for tank number one, is actually for construction management inspection and a peer review.
I think that's C. B and D are, I thought both design and C was for construction management. There's a lot of these. I might have.
I know I have so many here too, but so C is for tank number one, which is for the construction management and inspection. And as well as peer review.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
For D, this item here is for the design of the tank.
Of the tank.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm with you. All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Marty?
What about that 14-inch steel main that doesn't have any corrosion protection on it? In the staff report, I was just curious how that could be possible. That is it extra thick that there's no anodes on it, there's no induced current on it, it's just sitting up there and it's 50, 65 years old, and it is what we got, clearly. And so this will include the design of the steel pipe as well.
That's correct.
And we have to go steel up there for seismic reasons? Is that why we're going steel up there?
The existing pipeline is steel.
Right.
The new pipeline hasn't been determined. The material hasn't been
Oh,
determined.
okay.
But I think if we had to determine it, if we had to select a material, we would either go with ductile iron pipe or HDPE, which provides a little bit more flexibility during the seismic events.
And just thinking of how, when that tank goes out, how will those residents get their water?
So what I've heard, we've tried in the past, is when the tank is out of service, Lakeview Pump Station can run continuously.
I'll just stay.
It has to
just
continue
go.
to pump
Okay, got it,
to
got
be
it.
able to serve the resident through there. Because currently the Lakeview Pump Station is the one that pumping to
And then it could
the
draw
Sweeney,
down.
and then it draws down and serves the customer. So the Lakeview Pump Station would have to continuously be in operation during this construction of the tank as well.
Got it, okay. Yeah, it's probably an interesting how that all developed and got approved, and here you have this tank way up. Anyhow, it is what we got. It's in the water master plan. It was evaluated that needed to get done, and I would guess that they looked at alternatives to doing something different, but that was in 2013, right? So unfortunately, it's one of those expensive things that we have to deal with in this 100-year-old plus city. So I can support this.
Any other questions or comments? There's a requested action from Director.
I move that we approve the resolution. Thank you.
Second.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye. And before we move on to our last item, City Manager.
Oh, sure. Yes, I just wanted to thank staff for all the work to prioritize and move up these water projects. They're extremely needed. As we see, a number of our tanks are 55 to 65 years old, and it's sort of that utility that no one sees but is extremely important both for life safety, normal operations, and could have a catastrophic failure. So it's important that while the funds have been accumulating, that we push these forward, knowing that we have a lot of infrastructure that needs to get done. And so I know staff did a lot of work to get these projects to this stage, and will continue to work for their completion. And it's a significant amount of money. One project is $9 million, another project is nearly $6 million, and then another project is $3 million. And I also want to thank the council, because increasing water and sewage rates like you did really took a lot of courage, and there's a lot of pain being felt by the community, but it's absolutely needed, and we're moving forward with the project. So thank you both to staff and council for that.
Item E, please.
Item 6E, adopt resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a funding agreement with the County of San Mateo for the award of Measure K funding in the amount of $150,000 to rehabilitate the grandstand facility at the Tom Lara Field located at San Bruno City Park, and appropriate $150,000 of revenue and expenditure into the Tom Lara Field Improvements Capital Project in fiscal year 2019-20.
City Manager.
Yes, so I'll give this presentation, Javon Grogan, City Manager, to the mayor, members of council, and the public. We're really here to talk about an exciting project that represents a partnership between four people: San Bruno Lions, the San Bruno Community Foundation, the county with Measure K funding, and the city of San Bruno. And so what we're here tonight to give a brief presentation on is a project that will receive significant funding from Measure K. And so our objective tonight is threefold. One, receive information on the rehabilitation of the grandstand facility at Tom Lara Field located in City Park. We're asking council to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a funding agreement with the county in the award of Measure K funds for the amount of $150,000. And we'll talk about that shortly. And subject to their approval, appropriate those funds for use for the project. So our agenda, really quickly, we'll talk about the background, we'll talk about the project budget, we'll talk about the specific pot of Measure K funds that these are anticipated to be funded from, and then we will go into next steps. So the picture that's before you is the grandstand facility. As we all know, it is a well-utilized facility in City Park that, like a number of our facilities, needs little tender loving care and has suffered from a lack of preventative and ongoing maintenance, largely due to the resources that are available to the city. And so how this project came about. It came about not because it was a funded capital improvement project. It was certainly on the need list, but it came about with the San Bruno Lions approaching the city with the idea to rehabilitate the interior concession stand. That concession stand sits under the grandstand, and that project is estimated to cost $60,000. In hard costs, 25 of that, the Lions have received a grant from the San Bruno Community Foundation. The San Bruno Lions are set to contribute $35,000 in their own funds and the labor for those interior concession stand renovations. However, as we begun talking to the Lions about their excellent community service project, and they went out and secured funds and are tossing in their own money, it became clearly apparent that that improvement really couldn't happen unless we address some of the water intrusion issues and roof leaks and damage to the roof and the grandstand that actually sits on top of that concession area. So staff undertook as a new project, in addition to the work plan, to really investigate what would be needed. And we found a number of things once we did an in-depth investigation. One, the concrete roof and sidewalls need to be sealed, repaired to eliminate the current water intrusion. All of the doors and windows to the grandstand facility need to be replaced. The current bleachers, in order to fix the roof, have to be removed. And so given their current condition, there was a recommendation to replace those with new bleachers. And in addition, there's a number of cosmetic and minor repairs to landscaping, signage, fencing, and other areas sort of surrounding the grandstand area and actually on the facility. And so during the 1920 budget cycle, the City Council awarded $25,000 to help support efforts. And we were also well underway with working with the Lions to approach the county for funding, and Mayor Rico Medina and Councilmember Marty Medina were part of that effort to approach both Supervisor Canepa and Pine for some of their Measure K funds. And so really quickly, the estimated cost for this project is before you. And so total estimated cost is just under $175,000. That does not include the $60,000 for the interior concession stands that, again, will be done by the Lions. But an estimate of $75,000 for roof, structure, and exterior improvements, new aluminum bleachers of $36,000, replacing the doors and windows for $21,000, $18,000 for minor cosmetic upgrades, and just over $1,000 for replacing the alarm with contingency, $175,000. And so with Measure K, that's a half-cent sales tax countywide that was approved by county voters in November 2012 and extended in November 2016 for a total of 30 years. The county has a process where each year they allocate $7 million in one-time loans or grants to each of the 5 supervisory districts. So each supervisor receives approximately $1.4 million to recommend to the full Board of Supervisors that they be awarded either within their district or some other partnership. And so the City of San Bruno, with the Lions, approached both Supervisor Pine and Supervisor Canepa for $75,000 each to support this project. Both supervisors have committed to recommend it. It is tentatively scheduled to be on the September 17th County Board of Supervisors meeting. So should the City Council adopt the resolution tonight, we will turn around immediately in the morning and send the signed agreement that will appear on the September 17th Board of Supervisors meeting. And so, again, the request that is before the City Council tonight is to adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a funding agreement with the County of San Mateo for the award of Measure K funds in the amount of $150,000 to rehabilitate the grandstand facility at Tom Lahr Field located in San Bruno City Park and appropriate $150,000 of revenue and expense into the Tom Lahr Field Improvement Capital Project for the fiscal year 1920. We will also submit a signed funding agreement based on council action, should council approve it. And again, it is set to go before the County Board of Supervisors this month, September 17th. That concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions from council? None? Laura? I don't see any lights, so.
Through the chair, to Javon, this is City Manager Javon Grogan. It's a great project, and it's, I think it's excellent use of Measure K funding. So Measure K funding has been out there since 2012. And explain a little bit how that works. You can't just say, hey, we'd like to do this project, or do you, I mean, I guess maybe the question is more why the city hasn't used it in the past.
So the city has used it in the past. We currently fund a position for Life Moves. It's a position that there is supervisor. So we currently have received Measure K funding to fund a position with Life Moves. We are also looking at Measure K funding for the Aquatic and Rec Center to potentially cover some costs with that. But Measure K has a funding cycle, and we are looking at upcoming funding cycles to apply for those funds.
Just clarify. On the slide, it said 212, but it said 217 is when they started getting the allocations. So that's...
Yeah, so...
That was confusing.
The specific supervisory allocations was not in 2012.
Correct.
That was later.
2017. Just to clarify on the Life Moves, just because I don't know that everybody knows what we're discussing. For us dealing with the homeless, we have Life Moves that assist South City, San Bruno, et cetera, and they allocate one person. And obviously, as we know, there's a need, and they actually go to the person trying to get them off the street, trying to get services and do what we can, right, and be compassionate. However, the need is greater. So through a grant, it went ahead and it had a second person. Well, that is about to expire in a month or so. So another source that Supervisor Pine has concurred is to continue that second allocated caseworker from Life Moves is that he's committed that to the Vice Mayor and I when we were at an ad hoc committee for that, which has been in the works. And when I was on the phone with him this afternoon, he has reaffirmed that is, again, as he says, I've already committed, and again, you have that. And so, but I just wanted to clarify that. Marty, sorry.
Yes. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Mayor. I know the Lions originated this, but we also, as a Lion, it was great to have the Mayor also speak to our supervisors, and this is a great way that we collaborated and were able to hopefully bring something forward that is going to benefit our whole community. The Lions will be paying for all of the interior improvements with the $25,000 as stated, and that's why we sell hot dogs and burgers and to return back to our community something that's needed. So I'm very thankful and I'm very hopeful that this will pass and looking forward to future collaborations. So thank you, everybody.
Other questions, comments? Michael?
Through the chair, just one comment. Both Dave Pine and Dave Canepa have been really good friends to San Bruno, and they're here in the community often. They participate in a lot of things here, and so I just kind of wanted to acknowledge their ongoing support of the city of San Bruno and this project specifically. So it's a great collaboration.
No, and then all I was going to say is I want to thank staff too, because it's one thing, but staff put together and got the breakdown of the costs, formulated a letter that I reviewed with Marty, but just needed to sign, and then following up with the supervisors, and they both have been very supportive. And I can remember when we dedicated believe it or not, it goes back a ways, dedicated that to Tom Lara when Quentin Kopp was in Sacramento and came down and basically kind of led it with Mr. Lara at the time. With that said, when I was a young man at Parks and Rec, nothing's been done since, so more or less. So it is time, and it obviously has the need, and we are appreciative, as Mr. Salazar said, to both supervisors, Canepa and Pine, for stepping forward, doing that. With that said, if this resolution passes, they have a pending draft agenda, which staff would send it to them because it goes out Thursday. It needs to go to the full board as a procedural matter, and then the board would vote on it the 17th for approval. Any action by council?
Motion to approve the resolution.
Second. Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Now we're going to go to comments from council members. Michael? Irene?
Thank you. I have two. First, there's California Coastal Cleanup is taking place on September 21st, and even though San Bruno does not have a coast, we do clean up. So if you would like to join us, the BTF and several other volunteers will be in front of the Mosaic at the train station from 9 to noon, again on Saturday, September 1st. We'll supply all the equipment. All you have to do is come and join us. So that. Then I have something else I'd like to say. So in general, when planning commissioners and council members speak in public, even when we announce we are speaking as private citizens, our words have added perceived weight and significance. During a recorded public forum that took place Saturday, a candidate identifying herself repeatedly as a planning commissioner made the following statements several times: that the city of San Bruno was going to waive the development impact fees for the Mills Park project. That sounds like the city wasn't going to receive any fees from that developer. However, since several projects were in the pipeline before the fees were imposed, the council voted 5-0 not to impose the development impact fees on those projects. Instead, we negotiated through a development agreement that the developer pay $5 million of unrestricted funds with another $5 million if the developer elected to develop for sale condos. This information was included in the staff report and verbalized at a planning commission meeting. Developers listen to our statements. We need to be careful that we don't give the wrong impression that the city of San Bruno generally waives development fees. Another statement made by this planning commissioner was that the commissioners had received information that the owners of Bay Hill Shopping Center want to demolish the shopping center. This is not true at all. This misinformation can cause anxiety for the people who have businesses there and who are employed there. It is irresponsible to make these kinds of statements in a public forum. I ask the person making them to refrain from doing so and to correct any misconceptions that our statements may have caused. Thank you.
Laura?
Nothing.
Marty?
Yes, I'd like to invite everybody here and everybody watching tomorrow morning at 7:45, so you might have to get up early, at Bel Air Elementary School. Safe routes to school, they're going to have a Bel Air walk audit. And so basically, we're going to meet there and we're going to walk the school route and we're going to look at what safety improvements can be done there. I went to one in Daly City. It's very, very informative. They have experts that provide the recommendations. So the whole community is invited. 7:45, Bel Air School tomorrow. Coffee and some light refreshments will be served.
Thank you. Okay, I have one thing, and then I'm going to have a long statement when we adjourn this evening. The one thing I want to make a comment is last meeting on the 28th, I talked about Stand Against Hate, and that was something that came from the East Bay that was coming into the county. Yesterday, I met with the mayors of Millbrae and Burlingame, who are enthusiastic about moving that forward, the mayor of South City. We collaborated and would like to send out a letter to our colleagues throughout the county and the supervisors to ask each community to celebrate in the sense of bringing to attention through November 17th through the 23rd. As we know what goes on in our communities, in our county, in our state, in our world, sometimes I think we need to pause and remind ourselves and each other that none of us want the violence. We need more tolerance, and we certainly do not stand for hate. So with that said, if the council's in concurrence, I wanted to bring a resolution. One was already passed in another neighboring city, so I'd ask if I could do that at the next meeting. With that said, I'm going to move on to adjournment, but obviously I think there's a couple things that need to be noted. Nearly 3,000 people of various ages, professions, ethnic and religious backgrounds died by the terrorist attack on our nation on September 11th. As tomorrow it will mark 18 years ago that this happened. As you awake tomorrow and remember the sorrow and pain our nation went through and felt that day, I ask you to pause and take a moment to remember those that were lost and the pain their families and the survivors still face today. Yesterday marked in this city 9 years ago since the PG&E gas line explosion, and yesterday I attended a remembrance in the neighborhood that I have attended since the second year due to the first year being at Skyline College. I took time to reflect from that night when Mayor Ruane and I as Vice Mayor arrived shortly after the explosion, watching those injured and none leaving the area and the shock and disbelief on their faces. In the months and years after, with all that happened to our city and the changes we have made to make sure this does not happen to another town or city again. I had attended every funeral that was held for those that died, which was one of the hardest things I have done in elective office. And there is no training or truly being prepared for that. I also remembered how impressed I was on how all the staff from all the departments responded and came together and dealt with the disaster while keeping the city operating day to day at the same time. And of course, our residents, the courage, resilience, support, and love that this community showed during this disaster. We were truly one. I want to tell you a story that I have shared with a few, but not in this venue. After the explosion, Jim and I visited some of the injured at a burn ward. A year went by, and the last funeral was held since the daughter was so injured she was unable to attend her mother's funeral until then. It was a private funeral, but I was honored to be asked to attend. It was the most upbeat out of all the services I had attended, maybe due to the time that had passed, and it was more of a celebration of life with laughter and stories. After the service, I was asked to attend the reception. While at the event, at one point, who I had talked to at the burn ward and I had a beer and turned the corner to see his wife and her sister who had been in the burn ward and not knowing what their future may hold. I turned to him and said, "Did you ever think a year ago when we met in the burn ward that you and I would be standing here together today watching them dance again?" He replied, "No." At that moment, we toasted, and I realized that we must never lose hope, always keep the faith, and never underestimate the ability of people, no matter what the circumstance. I ask all of you for a moment of silence in the memory of those lost on September 11th, and to our 8 San Bruno Angels that lost their lives from that tragic night on September the 9th. They are remembered and will never be forgotten. With that, thank you. We will adjourn this regular meeting to be the next one to be held on September the 24th, 7 o'clock, right here at the San Bruno Senior Center. Enjoy the rest of your week.